Yes, viewers, this is really the biggest story of the evening, and we're going to, of course, go into more details over the next few moments with you. But let me quickly recap the basic headline news. There is information put out by highly placed sources in defense circles that suggest that there has been a clash between Indian and Chinese People's Liberation Army soldiers at Yangtze in Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh on December 9th. This is what is coming out. Viewers, this is happening obviously for the first time in this sort of capacity after the 15th of June 2020, when there were clashes in Galwan in eastern Ladakh. And you will remember, viewers, that in those clashes 20 Indian soldiers were killed and there were several casualties on the Chinese side. Many different agencies have told Times Now earlier that in Galwan the Chinese suffered more casualties than the Indian side took. But here, viewers, we are being told that there have been injuries sustained, that is in Arunachal, that there have been injuries sustained on both sides. We can't quite tell you exactly how many soldiers were present, but there are some indications that there might have been several hundreds. Let's go across to Padmaja Joshi, who joins me from the newsroom for more on this. First things first, Padmaja, where is this clash taken place? What is the news that we are getting as to nature of this clash? How did this clash happen? And are there any casualties or injuries?
Yes, Rahul, there are in fact injuries that have taken place on both sides. So here is what I can tell you from sources within the army, that this was a regular patrol that takes place, and it is done by troops on both sides. So regular patrol was being carried out by both sides. However, at some point the LAC, the PLA soldiers, came in an area which India claims as its own. This, remember, by the way, is the general area of Tawang. Tawang is the sector. We're not going to name the specific place where this altercation has taken place. Subsequently, the Indian Army soldiers challenged those of the PLA, said this is our land. Then there was a bit of jostling, both pushed each other. Subsequently, immediately there was a de-escalation. After that, a flag meeting between commanders of both sides took place. Now, here are a couple of things that I can confirm. One is that injuries have taken place on both sides. Two, that the injuries are not very serious in nature. And three, that there were no sharp weapons that were used. Remember, in Galwan, there were some very serious injuries that were incurred because of these improvised weapons, sort of clubs with barbed wire that were used by the PLA soldiers. Yeah. In the present case, I am being told that no such sharp weapons were employed, and of course, there is an understanding that no actual shots will be fired, so no weapons were used. Are the 4 points that I can confirm right now. Back to you.
Well, Padmaja, just about a few days back, on the sidelines of the G20 summit, the Prime Minister did meet or at least exchange pleasantries with President Xi of China. There wasn't any protracted conversation, but we are being told that there has been an apprehension that the situation along the LAC that might be stable is also unpredictable. In fact, the army chief had used those specific terms, number one. And number two, of course, the foreign minister, even while speaking to Times Now, has routinely emphasized that this particular relationship with China is at a low at this moment in time.
Rahul, the standard operating principle, if one can call it that, is check but verify. So while disengagement has taken place, like you said, General Pandey said right at the outset that while disengagement is taking place, things still remain very fluid as far as the LAC is concerned. Now, when we're taking a look at this map and we're looking at the general area of Tawang, what has caught many people by surprise is the fact that in eastern Ladakh, of course, 2020, we had that face-off, we had an altercation. There is constantly worry about how China is ramping up its infrastructure there. But what many people do not mention, or what they fail to notice, is that India also is systematically building up its infrastructure on our side of the LAC. So while that is being done in eastern Ladakh, which remains the more unsettled, as it were, sector of the LAC, for this clash to have taken place in Arunachal is also what has made a lot of people very surprised. But see this in the context of what has happened in the recent past. The fact that there has been a growing unrest within China because of COVID curbs that have been put in place. Second, that India just 3 weeks ago had put up its first greenfield airport that was inaugurated in Arunachal. Third, that in the last 3 years we have built an amazing number of kilometers of border roads, especially in the eastern sector. And finally, that a lot of this infrastructure is being built in this general area of Tawang in Arunachal. So all of these factors could be a reason, Rahul, that China could be restive.
Now, the LAC, viewers, often flares up because there are several flashpoints, disputed and sensitive areas, at least 23 from what we are told. And most of the LAC is unresolved, 3,488 kilometer long LAC. Obviously witnesses contending claims on territory and aggressive patrolling and face-offs. It's not the first time that this is happening. Remember, viewers, this is a regular and routine affair. There are also incursions. Padmaja, so very quickly, here you're saying that there are differing claims, perceptions really, on what constitutes Indian land, or what constitutes in fact the LAC, or what constitutes Chinese land, and there have been no incursions that were at least committed on the 9th, and no one is in any way ingressed and remained on the Indian side. Is that what you're confirming?
Absolutely not at all. In fact, there is no question of anyone actually continuing to stay on Indian land. It was, it was a flashpoint. They stepped over in territory that we claim as our own, which is why immediately at that point, they were challenged. In the words of army sources that we've spoken to, they were resolutely challenged, because of which this altercation took place. And subsequently, the flag meeting that was held, immediately steps were taken to ensure that status quo prevails and that no such further clash take place. Of the injuries that we are getting to know, there are no serious injuries, there are no life-threatening injuries, there is no blunt force trauma, there are no shots fired, and there are definitely no casualties. And as far as anyone encroaching on Indian land at present, that also has been completely discounted by the army sources, Rahul.
So just let me come back to you and circle back to you on some of these specifics. How many soldiers were in this clash on either side, or at least from the Chinese side, if you have any information to that effect? And the soldiers on the Indian side, Indian Army soldiers that are injured, where are they right now? Are they at the base hospital here in Delhi, or are they still in the hospitals in the eastern sector? Any information?
Well, there, a usual patrolling party, there were about 6 injuries that are being reported right now. I want to quickly take across our viewers to an open source intelligence map that in fact we have sourced here. And this is the area here, Rahul, that is being reported as the territory. Now this, remember, is all of Arunachal Pradesh. This here is Bhutan. This here is Tawang. And right here is where the reported skirmish and the face-off has taken place on the 9th of December 2022. So far, what we are being told, what Srinjoy Chaudhary is reporting rather, is that there are about 3 soldiers who have been injured on the Indian side. We're also being told that as far as the Chinese, the PLA soldiers are concerned, they have far more injuries on their side. About 6 to 7 injuries are being reported on their side. But this here, if you take a look again, this right here is the area. This is Tawang, like I said, it's the general sector Tawang, but it's closer here, right here at the LAC, where that skirmish took place. Now, like you've been also reiterating, Rahul, all of this area, the entire border that India shares with China, right from Jammu and Kashmir, extending all the way up to Arunachal Pradesh, is nowhere clearly marked out in terms of a fence, unlike the LOC or any kind of marker. So the patrolling that takes place is largely on perception, and which is why here there was perhaps a difference in perception. Some experts also saying that this could be deliberate on the part of the Chinese. It was an attempted misadventure, but it was rebuffed very strongly and resolutely on the 9th, leading to the clash and injuries. Back to you.
Well, viewers, just very quickly to give you an overview, the entire LAC is divided into the western sector, which would be Ladakh, the middle, which is the Himachal and Uttarakhand area, and of course Sikkim and eastern sectors, which also includes Arunachal Pradesh. And the area that Padmaja is pointing to is in a junction where we also have the Bhutanese border. So it's obviously an area which is a triangulation, 3 territories, and that is really where this has happened. Now, Padmaja, let's jog your memory back a little bit. Tawang has seen clashes earlier too, hasn't it?
Well, not really clashes per se, Rahul, but there have been episodes in the past, especially of civilians crossing over. There was one, if I'm not mistaken, last year or at the beginning of this year, where a civilian had gone missing. 2 boys had gone missing because they said that they had gone hunting and they were returned about 3-4 days after they went missing. There was quite a bit of panic, but they said that they were, they had gone hunting, they had crossed the LAC and they had gone over to China's side, and they were returned in a meeting between troops of both sides. But yes, largely it has been in the northern sector where we've seen more aggressive activity, activity on the part of the Chinese, where they are building bridge, where they are trying to carry out aggressive patrols onto Indian territory. But in Tawang, this is not something that one heard of. However, of late, there were a number of pictures that were also emerging in Tawang of China trying to ramp up, the kind of infrastructure activity or the building activity that they are carrying out on their side. However, like we have also been reiterating here, India in the recent past has more than doubled the kind of road construction that it has carried out, especially in the Arunachal region. And between 2014 and 2019, this went up to 1.5 kilometers per day, because 44,000 crore rupees were allocated just for building roads in Arunachal, realizing how important this is when it comes to the LAC. Back to you.
Okay, stay on with us. I just want to open this up, viewers, and bring in Maroof Raza and General G.D. Bakshi. Gentlemen, don't need any introductions, really. Maroof, your insight, what do you think has happened here? Where do we go from here?
See, Rahul, as far as the Chinese claims are concerned on what I insist on calling the boundary line and not the border, because the border is something that is formalized. Both in the LAC, there are boundary claims by them and counterclaims by us. And then in the McMahon line, which is what has happened right now between the Bhutan and junction between Bhutan, McMahon line, Arunachal, and that line runs all the way right to the tri-junction, which is the Myanmar, China, India boundary. Now, Chinese have a history of intruding and coming in and trying to force their way in. And when they manage to push you off, then they claim that they've always been there. The second thing is these disputes will continue because the Chinese have in the past looked at the possibility, and this matter died many years ago, actually 59-60. But then again, when the Galwan incident happened, the Chinese threw up again the 1960 proposal, which was basically a swap proposal that we accept your presence in Arunachal. And this was part of the arrangements that came between China and India in the 2 prime ministerial visits of 1993 and 1996. When they talked of peace and tranquility, that Chinese will not disturb populated areas by India, and India will gradually go around to accepting the Chinese claim lines around eastern Ladakh. Anyway, that fell through because of a variety of reasons. The bottom line being, India has decided to build its infrastructure all along the boundary from Ladakh right up to Arunachal. And this is something that irks the Chinese. If you remember, the Doklam standoff also happened in and around the Bhutan-India area, which is a bit more east of what has happened right now. Sorry, a bit more west of what has happened right now, because that is near the north of the Siliguri corridor. This area is the other side of Bhutan where the clashes are taking place, because Chinese have historically laid claim on Tawang, saying it is part of southern Tibet and it is a monastery which is holy to the Tibetan belief, and therefore Tibet is part of China, so they say. So therefore this belongs to China. Now in 1950s, there was a very aggressive movement carried out by the governor of Assam under a gentleman called Major Bob Khatin, Military Cross, who went with a patrol and occupied Tawang, and thereafter Tawang has remained with India. Sadly for the Chinese, they took over our positions in Tawang, which our troops, due to confusing orders in 62, were asked to hold on, then abandon, then hold on again. So in the confusion, Chinese came in up to Tawang, which could have otherwise been very well defended. But after that, lesson learned, and this is part of the findings of the Henderson-Brooks report, that we will not abandon Tawang, whatever be the case. And therefore, this is a sticking point with the Chinese, and we will see more of it. Whatever the claims by the MEA, the talks will finally lead to tranquility and we will be back to status quo ante. It is not going to happen. The Chinese are more and more going to bother us, and our firm presence there is something that China has not been able to digest, and especially the drubbing they got at Galwan.
More inputs coming in. Just hold your thoughts, and I want to go across to Srinjoy Chaudhary. Srinjoy, three things. We are being told that the Chinese had come heavily prepared with at least 300 soldiers. Can you elaborate on the numbers, perhaps on both sides? Number one. Number two, why has there been no official statement put out by the government? And number three, Parliament is in session. How is it that this news is breaking outside of Parliament and not inside Parliament, where perhaps the government should have taken India into confidence?
Yes, it's 3 days, Rahul, since the clash took place. The government could have spoken about it earlier, but there was a Saturday and Sunday in between. Today, at least, the government could have spoken about it in the morning, but there was nothing in Parliament about what happened. Secondly, yes, the Chinese were well prepared. They started the stone pelting, which is why 3 Indian soldiers have been injured. They are from the Jackrif. One has a head injury. But what I'm hearing is all 3 are out of danger. There were minor injuries, I was told. One has a minor head injury, the other were injured, but all 3 are out of danger. Yes, there have been injuries on the Chinese side because the Indian side retaliated. It was all stone pelting. There was no bullet injuries of any kind. Also, after the flag meeting at the brigadier level, which was one of the brigadiers there held the meeting with his Chinese counterpart the next day. This was, I think, the brigadier of 190 Brigade. Things have got it sorted out, at least for now. What the Chinese are going to do tomorrow, we don't know. But at least after the flag meeting, what I'm hearing from very high level sources in the government, that things have got sorted out. And we will have to see what happens. Naturally, you never know with the Chinese, they can do something tomorrow. But the flag meeting at least has helped to cool down things. Of course, you cannot say the problem has been resolved, because the problem really started because of differing perceptions of where the line of actual control is. The Chinese said it is at one place, India said it's in another place, which is where the Chinese started the stone pelting, and they had lots of stones to pelt. So you could argue that yes, they were prepared for it. And after the stone pelting started from the Chinese side, India retaliated. But as I said, there have been 3 injuries, one with a head injury, 3 Jackrif soldiers, but all 3 are out of danger at this point. After
stay on with me.
And it has gone well, at least.
We're losing your signal, so stay on with me. You're dropping out. Let me just bring in General Bakshi. General Bakshi, a serious incident of this nature, we're not we're finding out through, of course, sources in government, no comment officially, as Srinjoy Chaudhary has said, from the government as of now. Parliament not informed. This happened on the 9th of December, reportedly, of course. This is what sources have told us. A, are you surprised at the level of perhaps discretion? And number two, how should the government react, A, immediately and as the days unfold?
Rahul, I think Maroof gave you a very comprehensive historical account of our border problems with China in this particular Arunachal sector. I'll just add one piece of history, right? There was General Sagat Singh, who was one of the heroes of the 71 war. He took over as GOC 17 Div in Sikkim, right? There were these incessant clashes taking place, fist carves, boots, butts, stone pelting, etc., etc. He passed a very clear order. If anybody responds to the Chinese with boots, butts and stones, I will court-martial him. You have been issued by the government of India weapons and ammunition, and I expect you to use them in the defense of our territory. All right? And I'll court-martial the first guy who tries this, fist cuffs and kushti and bhagada and all that kind of a joke. The joke stopped, and then there was a fierce clash at Nathula in which, all the weapons that were possible, the Chinese opened up first, we retaliated strongly, and then we escalated to the use of mortars and artillery, and then we employed medium artillery guns, which hit the Chinese in Yatung. There were overall said to be 500 to 750 Chinese casualties. We had no problems for the next 30 years. You want to keep doing this tamasha, this kushti, this fist cuffs, and this non-military conduct. Well, then you can keep having it for the next 30 years to come. What is the cost for China? What is the cost for China? Our external affairs minister made some very pertinent and cogent observations that things are not normal at the line of actual control at the border with China. They cannot be normal as long as these fist cuffs, they were taking place so far in Ladakh, now they have spread to China. They came prepared there at Galwan with a whole pile of pointed sharp stones, bat balls, baseballs fixed with barbed wire and, all that kind of a tamasha. Well, either we are fighting or we are not fighting. Either we are fighting to defend our territory. Well, then, you push it. You push the envelope and see. Then, unless somebody is serious, this tomfoolery will stop. This is exactly what I have seen happen with my own eyes when a tough commander came on the spot and gave clear-cut orders. Look, we are not fooling around with our territory. We are not playing football matches and kushti matches. We are not here, we are not paid to do kushti with the Chinese. Do the Taiwanese do kushti with the Chinese? Do the Americans do kushti with the Chinese? They find this non-professional conduct. But because the Chinese have imposed it on us, we have taken it down. We must follow the Chinese rule book. Why? For how long? And everything has been resolved. Everything is so peaceful, I don't know. I've never seen a more peaceful border. I'm sorry, as a soldier, it hurts. Either we are soldiers or we are not soldiers, right? Either we behave in a soldierly manner or we don't behave in a soldierly manner. And we continue with this tamasha month on month, year on year. And we have a few boys who have their heads split open. We split a few heads open on the other side. The Chinese, we say we've done about 30. The media says over 100 Chinese have been killed. Chinese say 5, then they call those people and celebrate in their parliament. I mean, I think this kind of a joke has gone on for far too long. Either you are serious about your territory or you are not.
You're serious about your territory or you're not?
As a veteran soldier, I feel belittled, I feel ashamed.
So, General, let me ask you, what do you make of the location where the clash took place. Why did the Chinese decide, if what Srinjo has told us, that they perhaps planned this, they came with a sack full or maybe more than a few sackfuls of stones and they ambushed our troops, etc. Why did they pick this particular tri-junction where the Bhutanese border and of course the Indian border, as well as the Chinese, you know, I wouldn't call it border, supposing because Maroof will say that this is not a border, but it's a boundary line, okay, where all these three boundary lines sort of meet. General.
Look, Rahul, as far as the Chinese are concerned, they claim the whole of Arunachal Pradesh in its entirety. They don't just claim this, border tri-junction. And every time your minister, even if your prime minister goes to Arunachal, they object. They object seriously. If there is any of our citizens from Arunachal in any delegation, they refuse to accept that delegation into China. I don't think they could be clearer. Now we have built an army of specialists whose job it is to dig out the minutiae of, this has this significance, vis-a-vis that it has this significance. Well, I mean, as a soldier, I would say arrant nonsense. If you're serious about this is the line I defend, you cross this line again and again and again. Now you will pay a price.
You will pay a price.
The day you make them pay the price, you will find these tamashas reducing dramatically in frequency and, the gaps between each.
Okay, so what's changed?
Because then
Maroof
it is serious.
Raza. Okay, they are not serious. Okay, fair enough. General Sagat Singh's example was invoked by General Bakshi, Maroof Raza. Why did we discontinue with this sort of very honorable tradition, or at least very valorous tradition, as General Bakshi has said, existed?
Well, Rahul, a couple of points, and I'm going to say things which is going to irk sensitivities, particularly amongst those who think the ruling party has got it all right with China. The first thing is that we seem to be, in a way, going back to Nehru's policies on China, which is, show the white flag and be relatively willing to talk and get round to a solution. Yes, it has been argued by many historians that failure of diplomacy leads to conflict. After conflict, we go back to diplomacy. But have the diplomats been able to deliver any results in the 24 special representative meetings that they've had with the Chinese, other than eating a bit of chow mein and doing sightseeing in Beijing and whatever else? The fact of the matter is you have to deal with an aggressive enemy from a position of strength. It is not just General Sagat Singh, who I am a great admirer of, and I've talked about it in some detail in my book on China, but also General Sundarji's operations around Sumdorongchu again put them in a bit of shock. And that is what led to the Chinese inviting Rajiv Gandhi for talks, and what we now talk about Rajiv Gandhi's great visit to China. But it came out of your military posturing. It didn't come out because suddenly they realized that India needs to be befriended. Thirdly, we must also understand that every time we've taken a tough stand with the Chinese, they have gone into hibernation for 1 or 2 decades or even more. But now what is happening is that the Chinese leadership is under pressure. They want to show that they have been making gains somewhere in the territories, because the territory of Arunachal is something that is the whole Maoist dictum the Chinese are saddled with. The Tibet is the palm of your hand, and the 5 fingers are Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and Arunachal. So they will keep laying claims, and we have to let it be known that next time we're not going to push you, we'll bloody well shoot you off. And you want to shoot, we are willing to die. Are you willing to die? Is something I've argued in the last chapter of my book, that the Indian soldier is willing to die. The Chinese soldier is from a family of 1 child per family. They're not willing to die, whatever the diktat of the Communist Party be. So we have hardened soldiers, we have battlefield experience. We have not called it upon ourselves, but if pushed into it, this is a message you have to pay as a power with aspirations. You can't be pushed around. Did Vietnam get pushed around? Deng Xiaoping tried to teach the Vietnamese a lesson in 1971. 1979, pardon me. And the Chinese learned many lessons from the Vietnamese. They're 1/10 our size. What is wrong with us, except for the fact that we are saddled with the baggage of policies in South Bloc, which are, to me now, redundant. You have to rewrite the rule book with the Chinese. People will say Maroof Raza is pushing for conflict. Listen, all nuclear weapon states have a window for strategic military operations without using nuclear weapons. Remember Kargil? Remember what happened in Galwan? So don't fear the Chinese unnecessarily. Chinese also will fear you if you make them fear them. And finally, as General Bakshi rightly brought out, that Sagat Singh's messaging was very correct, but also General Bakshi has argued in one of his books, which I reviewed, the revolving door strategy, which is if they move in somewhere, you move in another part of the boundary line and say, we will vacate that if you vacate this. You can't just stand there totally. Every guy who's played any sport on the fields will know best form of defense is offense. So you cannot be passive anymore. And you can say that, listen, cut out this nonsense of throwing sticks and stones at us. We fought with sticks and stones in 1962 when ammunition ran out. But we are not in that same predicament anymore because 1962 and 2022 are two different eras. And we will give it to them as good as we can get, perhaps even harder. Now, if that message goes down and we stop our passive apologist approach that we are trying to talk them out of it, nothing happens in China without the diktat of the Communist Party. Those of us who study China know that. So this hasn't happened because some maverick brigade commander or division commander has decided to teach India a lesson. He's got a message from his theater command, which is the Chinese Southwestern Command, and they've got messaging from Beijing that, listen, start unsettling India because they're getting too close to the Americans, and before we cannot break their self-confidence, destroy their self-confidence.
Okay, there have been statements. That's a very important statement. General, I'm just going to come out to you. Srinjoy Chaudhary, any clarity on when we can expect an official response from the Indian government or the Defense Ministry or even the army via spokespeople, etc., on what really transpired?
Well, we know what transpired, but officially the army, the Defense Ministry and the government has not as yet said anything. Well, you would expect this to come up in Parliament tomorrow. Most certainly it will be brought up, if nothing else, by the opposition. Then surely the government will have to reply to it. Surely there will have to be a statement by the government of India, either by the External Affairs Minister or by the Defense Minister on what has happened. You would expect that with Parliament in session. Now that it's out in the open, you could imagine that the government would have said this today. They could have taken the initiative and come out this morning and said, look, this has happened. 3 of our soldiers have been injured in the stone pelting. Some Chinese soldiers have also sustained minor injuries. There has been a meeting at the border between brigadiers and equivalent, and things have got sorted out for now. That could have easily been said by the government. It didn't, and the information did leak out later in the day. You would expect the government to actually clarify the situation tomorrow. There is no harm in doing it. It does a lot of good if you actually stand up and clarify the situation and say, well, this is the situation, this is what has happened, and this is what we plan to do.
Also, of course, General Bakshi, we would all as Indians want to know a little bit more about the bravery of our soldiers and how they disperse these cowardly Chinese land grabbers.
Hello.
Yes, General Saab. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rahul, very luckily the boys involved in this clash are I'm told, from my regiment, Jammu and Kashmir Rifles. I have served 37 years with these boys. They are the salt of the earth. They are the best mountain troopers that you can find. They are the descendants of General Zorawar Singh, who went about 740 kilometers inside Tibet. And that was in 1841, right? These are salt of the earth boys. And man to man, they will give the Chinese 10 times as good as they get, right? But I feel terrible for the boys. Why are their hands and feet tied by an agreement, which says that no firearms would be used? I mean, then we might as well put the Seema Suraksha Bal, or we might as well put the women's police up there.
No, not that the women's police will also, of course, do a very. No, I'm sure even the women's police will give the Chinese a good bashing. Let me tell you that also. General Saab, just give me 30 seconds. The PRO, Tezpur, has put out a statement, at least that's what's been forwarded to me. This is the relations to the Tawang sector incident, December 12, 2022, Monday, which is today, viewers. In certain areas along the LAC in the Tawang sector in Arunachal Pradesh, there are areas of differing perception, wherein both sides patrol the areas up to their claim lines. This has been the trend since 2006. On 9 December 2022, PLA troops contacted the LAC in Tawang sector, which was contested by own troops in a firm and resolute manner. Quote unquote, firm and resolute manner. This face-off led to minor injuries to few personnel from both sides. Both sides immediately disengaged from the area. As a follow-up to the incident, own commander in the area held a flag meeting with his counterpart to discuss the issue in accordance with structured mechanisms to restore peace and tranquility. Maroof, can you very quickly decode this statement?
Rahul, see, the first thing is that my understanding, and General Bakshi has more experience than me, but I've also served as an infantryman, and our troops never make the first move unless so ordered. So if the first moves were made by our troops, then senior commanders will have to be held responsible for upsetting the peace and tranquility. If not, then, and that is more likely a situation that it was brought upon them. And when it is brought upon them, the message is very clear right across the Indian Army that Galwan has taught us that we can give it as good as we get and perhaps more. So the second thing was a peace and tranquility. We are saddled with the baggage of this agreement on peace and tranquility. General Bakshi has been talking about this, and I am also no great admirer of that, because everything has its time. Everything has a sort of, after which it becomes irrelevant. So this agreement was brought into place between two sets of arrangements in 1993 and 1996, where peace and tranquility was agreed, and a lot of acronyms are used in those agreements. Also, the fact is that at that point of time, it was seen even by India that we were at a reasonable advantage by going along with this peace and tranquility thing, because we needed to build up our presence there and build up our resources. Today, we don't have to abide by the letter and spirit of that peace and tranquility agreement, because the MEA has itself said again and again that if Chinese don't adhere to the promises and agreements that were made between them and us, why is it incumbent upon us to continue to do that? So the fact of the matter is that the Chinese need to be told that sit down, and if we can force them to, which I doubt if we can do it, if we can force them to, that let us move forward. Do you know, Rahul, that the Chinese have never really accepted our maps which indicate our positions both on the LAC in Ladakh and the McMahon line, which came into being, as some of us know, in 1914, and it kind of lost a lot of its punch because it was announced at a time when the world drifted into World War I. But the McMahon line very clearly demarcates our boundaries in Arunachal. Yes. The only problem is Colonel Francis McMahon drew the line with a very thick felt pen on a quarter-inch map. General Bakshi will bear me out on this. That thick felt pen on either side of the felt pen line could be 1.5 kilometers. So which is your position and which is their position could be a great distance between that if you just go by the lay of the ground where the line has been marked on. Okay. And again, as Padmaja rightly brought out, the line has not been demarcated with pickets and posts and barbed wiring. So therefore, hill ranges, mountain ranges are all such, it can lead to a lot of confusion between which is my territory and your territory. Quite frankly, I think I will say this in all honesty, that many of our soldiers and commanders really don't know which red line is ours and which ridge line is theirs. There is still confusion on that. So we should get on to the business of marking out the lines if we can. You will not get anything with the Chinese unless you're willing to give something. Now, that is where you have to get realistic. If you think you have the political clout to enforce an agreement which will save lives and save harassment to troops and save the kind of distraction that a growing India can do without, then get on with it and instruct that an agreement should be formulated in the least possible frictional manner with the most possible results for both sides. So that is what this roundabout statement, which is delightfully ambiguous, that comes out from spokesperson, because nobody wants to build a cat.
That's true. Let me very quickly, General Sir, I'm just coming out to pay attention to some of these reactions. Political parties, viewers jumping into the fray now, at least here in India. Dr. Ajay Kumar coming in and saying, गलवान अरुणाचल प्रदेश में भारत और चीनी सैनिकों के बीच झड़प G20 अध्यक्ष चुप. That is the president of the G20 is silent, which is an obvious reference to the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Viewers, the Shiv Sena saying this is an uncalled for and unfortunate escalation provoked by PLA leading to injuries on both sides, wishing our brave men in uniform a speedy recovery. Surprised by government is not officially releasing their statement, issuing a condemnation rather than putting out news via sources. Of course, now viewers, we have a statement from the Tezpur PRO. We also have other reactions coming in. Asaduddin Owaisi, another Indian politician, of course, putting out a statement. Reports coming in from Arunachal Pradesh are worrying and alarming. A major clash took place between Indian and Chinese soldiers, and the government has kept the country in the dark for days. Why was Parliament not informed when it is in session? That's the point, General Saab, I was making with you. Why is Parliament in the dark? Why is India in the dark? At the very least, we need to know how bravely our soldiers have actually rebutted these Chinese interlopers. We also, of course, are getting differing numbers. I think Sinjoy said that between 3 or 6 soldiers on the Indian side might have been injured. Other reports seem to be putting the number at higher. So we don't really know what's happening. Very quickly, Sinjoy and General Saab. First, Srinjoy, quick updates on the casualties, if any, injuries, if any. Where are our soldiers being treated? Very quickly.
Well, they've been taken back to proper hospitals. Inside 3 injured soldiers, as I had mentioned. We know definitely of 3.
Okay.
One
so are
of
these
them
hospitals,
has a head injury.
Is it Guwahati or have they been moved here to Delhi?
No, they're not to move in the northeast,
okay,
and they are being treated in the northeast in hospitals.
Okay.
What we know is that there are 3 injuries that require this kind of treatment.
Right.
2 injuries plus a head injury.
Okay.
That perhaps is a more serious one, but what we know is all 3 are out of trouble.
So they're not in a critical state. Okay. General Saab, as we of course try to figure this out for ourselves through the sources, and one very extremely parsimonious statement that has been put out, it becomes very difficult to really understand the Indian reaction of what we are going to be doing next. Clearly, it's not the type of reaction that you want to see, General Saab.
I'm afraid absolutely not. I am very clear that the military fights like the military. The moment you blur the lines, the moment you give escape clauses, you confuse the hell out of your boys, who are simple, straightforward guys. He's told to shoot to kill, he will do so. And he will give you results. But this, this wrestling matches, these boxing matches, I mean, these are escape clauses. These are unprofessional. The American army calls them unprofessional response.
China has had to cut a sorry figure in Taiwan. Nancy Pelosi
wanted to come there. China threatened lava and brimstone. They ended up doing nothing. They had to eat crow.
Okay.
So what do? In their parliament, they call the soldiers who they say are the heroes of Galwan. Because this is low cost, you see. They can afford it. They can have many more tamashas like this to come in the year. Do we want to be part of a spectacle? How long? How long?
How long?
It's your border, period. And borders are defended. Borders
Okay,
are not
well, the government, at least a few years back, after Galwan exercised certain options, Dr. Ranganathan, repeated provocations from China. How do you react to the latest one?
Good evening, Rahul. First of all, I say whatever I say tonight as a layman, not as an expert, because you have esteemed experts in your panel already who have briefed everyone. Three things here. Number one, I am really relieved to hear from Sanjoy that there are three of our Jawans who suffered some injuries, have been treated, and they are fully on the road to recovery. That is a great relief. That has come as a great relief to everyone. Laymen as well as professional soldier alike. So I'm on that account, I'm very, very relieved, I must say. Number two, there is not much to say at this point of time as far as the political repercussions are concerned, except to say that I hope this time round, 2.5 years have gone past, a lot of water has gone under the bridge, and I hope the Congress and the opposition this time supports the government in this battle because as far as I can see, there is a differing perception. The boundary has never been defined of the LAC as well as the McMahon line, unlike the LOC. So our claims are disputed as much as their claims are disputed. And if these transgressions occurred, they have occurred during the UPA as well. The UPA Secretary Sham Saran is on record saying that the China had usurped 640 square kilometers of eastern Ladakh. And all the commentators during the UPA time were saying that the Galwan is China's as well. So I just hope Mr. Jindal does not make a controversial anti-India remark or even at this stage anti-government, because this has got nothing to do with the government as of today. Thank you.
Okay, well, what we're hearing is now from more sources that Indian Army soldiers belong to the Sikh and the Jat regiments. So there's more detail coming now. Srinjoy is nodding his head ferociously from side to side, saying that that is not true. So Srinjoy, you know, this is the real problem, isn't it? When the government itself is silent, we're going to be, of course, led by sources which will end up contradicting each other. This is mystifying. What are you hearing from your sources, Srinjoy, about, and I've asked you this question now twice, when is the government going to hold some sort of a briefing?
Well, I hope it is, because that would be the best way to do it in Parliament, either the Defence Minister or the External Affairs Minister. What I have heard, at least from my sources, and they have been fairly good ones, that these soldiers who were involved in the fighting were in the stone pelting were from the Raj Reef. Okay. From the Jack Reef. So Jack Reef were involved, not the Sikh regiment, not the Jat regiment, but Jack Reef. Maybe the Sikhs and the Jats got in later. But the initial altercation, initial stone pelting involved the Jack Reef people.
Okay.
Now, as I said, there are 3 injuries and all 3 are out of danger. Okay. One had a head injury.
Well, viewers, we don't have any confirmation apart from, as I told you, a statement that is very parsimonious on details that has been put out by the PRO of the Army in the Tezpur district. So we don't have much more on this particular information. But look at Jindal, the opposition already beginning to question the government on its lack of response, so to speak. We just heard from a civilian who's listening in to this broadcast, Dr. Ranganathan, saying that the opposition must this time at least speak to amplify the government's message and not to, at any level, backstab the government. How do you respond to this?
See, first of all, it deals with every one of us. Indian Army, they are our soldiers. So we would never accept such a form of aggression by the Chinese. However, there is one important point that we need to bear in mind. The Chinese crisis started deepening in the first week of December itself. And there is an old maxim that all colors agree in the dark. Generally, it is seen that states like China, suffering such form of deepening crisis, they resort to aggression to the neighborhood territories as the last measure. So there has to be some form of a preparedness by the government, a quick response, quick form of measures taken, so that this particular we should not be caught unprepared. I mean, we have to learn from the history. We don't have to put blames on each other. So let there be more of a, you can say, preparedness prior to any major form of a debacle that is to come. So let us stand in solidarity and united at all fronts.
Raza, raising his hand. Yes, Maroof.
Rahul, 2 quick points. When people talk about troops from Jat Regiment, Sikh Regiment, or Jackrif Regiment, you see, in a normal brigade that is deployed in an area, when we are hearing Chinese came in a few hundreds, the few hundreds would not come at a post or a picket only. They would be spread out in an area which could be challenging the lay of at least a battalion plus, could be up to a brigade. There are 3 battalions minimum that make up a brigade. And all infantry brigades of the Indian Army, which are deployed on the entire Sino-Indian border and on the Pakistan border, they are normally not made up of 3 units of the same regiment. Regiments are like tribes. So they could be people from Jammu Kashmir Rifle, they could be from Sikh Regiment, Jat Regiment, Gurkhas, Grenadiers, Kumaon, whatever else. They are all historical names that are carried from the areas where they are recruited. But having given all that, please remember, every infantry soldier of the Indian Army is salt of the earth. He is just been trained to do and die. He will fight as well as another guy next to him. Some of the myths that have been built up about the bravery of one community over the other are myths only.
Okay.
In reality, as far as the Indian Army is concerned, so the second point, and that's a brief point, that I don't think there is any ambiguity on the part of the Indian Army how to conduct itself on the boundary. If there is confusion, the confusion is in South Block. They have to clarify. I always say to people, when you want to understand the roots of a conflict, go back into history. And if you look at our history with China, all the confusion in 62 and even in 67, General Sagat did the smart thing. He just cut off his phone lines to Delhi. There was no cell phones, there was no internet. And he just told his troops, go hammer and tongs and destroy the buggers. And in 87, when Sundarji did what he did, it took the political establishment by surprise. And this General Sundarji did speak to me in a personal meeting long ago. So I would like to believe his words. So the bottom line is, Delhi has to clear up his mind. What are the benchmarks that Delhi is going to follow? Is it going to be the same baggage of the past that we'll keep saying that we are checking up the responses? Responses in today's era passed in lightning speed. If they don't get to the headquarters, there's something wrong with our communication and we have to revisit that. They must be there. All SITREPs would be there. Every detail would be there. MO Directorate would be wide awake through the night, marking out every pin and needle on the map. Everything would be sorted out. Now the decision rests with the civilian leadership.
Well, viewers, what we are seeing are fists in action at the LAC in the Tawang sector just a few days after handshakes, viewers, in Indonesia. So there is this juxtaposition really of visuals, handshakes, pleasantries, meetings, etc., and fisticuffs at our border. This doesn't inspire confidence. And the tragedy is, and I want to bring in General Saab, that, the politics has begun. Let's just quickly play out the Congress reaction on this. Surjewala, who was, of course, spokesperson of the Congress, has reacted. I want to bring in General Bakshi right after that to give his 360 view on this entire issue one last final time. Let's play this out.
Firstly, let me commend the armed forces of India, who always bravely repulse every Chinese conspiracy to occupy our territory. But what is Prime Minister Modi and his government doing? Till date, for over 2 years, China is occupying 1,000 square kilometer territory of India in the Ladakh region. In the Depsang Plains, They have occupied illegally India's territory up to Y Junction. Daulat Beg Oldie, the most strategic airstrip, is now in the range of Chinese artillery fire.
Okay, General Saab, very quickly, how do you think now, at both the diplomatic as well as perhaps the military level, India should respond? We know that there has been a high-level flag meeting, but beyond that, what should we be doing? Diplomatically and militarily, if anything at all, maybe even economically. Yes.
Look, Rahul, as I see it, it is a spatial escalation. So far, these pinpricks were confined to Ladakh. We retaliated in Ladakh in kind by a mirror-imaged build-up.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, may have cooled things off a bit there, do not resolve them. Now a fresh front is being opened. You know, there is spatial escalation.
Yeah.
There is escalation in terms of widening the area of conflict. They have come in the same standard pattern with sackfuls of sharp-pointed stones to sort of injure, wound, possibly try and kill some of our Jawans. What I am concerned about is, Rahul, and which is a big change from my time, I find routinely when such incidents happen, there is a 2 to 3 days blackout that takes place. I mean, I can't understand. Our communications are excellent. Our communications are excellent. And
Yes, I can hear you. General Sam, I can hear you.
Hello.
I can hear you. You've just gone, your screen. Okay, well, the video's gone off. Well, viewers, I think what the general is trying to say, and I think what also Dr. Ranganathan was trying to say is that, look, number one, we must do what we have to do. I think Maroof also made that point, that we must take measures that are seen to be deterrents. Justice must be done, as they say, and must also be seen to be done. So the measures, yes, Dr. Ranganathan, yes, very quickly. Yeah.
No, as I was saying, that I am very relieved by my good friend Lokesh's very tempered response, and I think that I hope the Congress doesn't get swayed by the other regional opposition parties.
As long as, of course, the Congress doesn't add to the general atmosphere of trying to suggest that our response at the LOC has not been good enough, I think questions need to be asked to the government as to why we haven't in 3 days not had wind of this. This is something very, very important, viewers. In the past, the Congress seemed to suggest that the Indian Army wasn't up to the task and conceded territory. That they haven't done so far. And they've actually lauded the defense personnel for doing what they always do, viewers, which is to beat back our enemies. But the question will have to be asked of the political establishment today as to why there is silence. So let's hope, viewers, we hear a detailed statement tomorrow in Parliament, perhaps from the Defence Minister. I leave it at that. News are coming up. Stay with us. Don't go away.